Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at my favourite 25 board games designed by Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling. So these are a fantastic design duo, been around for a very long time and have made some of my absolute favourite games. Now some of these games are just by Kramer, some of them are just by Kiesling, but a lot of them are together. I thought I'd put them all on one list. And of course I've not played all of their games, but I've played a lot of them, so I have a pretty healthy sample size. Now before I get started on the top 25, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 25, I have Azul, so definitely one of the most popular games in terms of sales. This one is an abstract strategy, a tile drafting style game as you're picking up these cluster of tiles, placing them on your player board, trying to get the colours and the patterns to match in certain kind of orthogonal directions, as well as trying to complete rows and scoring points accordingly. There is some pretty spicy interaction in this game, as sometimes you can leave tiles in the mix and force your opponents to collect tiles that they don't want, because if you ever cannot place a tile, then they're going to start building up negative points. This one's grown on me over the years. I'm definitely cooler on this one than a lot of other people, but I can certainly see why people like it. At number 24, I have Sunken City. This one's certainly a forgotten gem. A pretty crazy game, definitely a chaotic one, as you are playing cards to move your piece around this kind of these floating bridges, trying to collect these different goods and return them back to base. But each turn this Neptune marker is going to be moving around the board and sinking certain bridges. You're trying to sink your opponents and make them waste all their movement and drop their goods back into the sea. So it has this kind of push your luck mechanism. Do you want to make lots of short trips, or do you want to make big trips, collect loads, risk getting sunken, but make it back all in once? So very cool, again, very chaotic, but a lot of fun. At number 23, I have Coal Baron, the great card game. Now, one of the blind spots on this list is actually Coal Baron. I've not played the original, but this is still a very cool game, as you are kind of loading up these different kind of wagons of coal, trying to complete these contracts. It has a cool worker placement system, as whenever you visit a location, every following player can go there, but they have to spend exactly one worker more. And because the kind of denominations on the cards are varied, you have to be careful to manage your hand of workers. Very cool, definitely underrated. That is Coal Baron, the great card game. At number 22, I have another popular game with Tikal. This is part of the Mask trilogy. This one, you are trying to vie for control over these temples as you explore through this kind of vast, dense forest, finding temples as you go, creating new routes, and trying to be at the right place at the right time. And when the scoring is triggered, every person is trying to rush to these temples. So the scoring tempo is actually very interesting. A little bit too luck dependent for me to truly love it, because the tile draw is very lucky and can definitely swing who wins or not. But the gameplay is solid, and it's a great example of the action points allowance mechanism. At number 21, I have Wandering Towers. Definitely one of the most family-friendly games on this list, as you are playing cards to move these towers around this rondel. You can move kind of just one level of the tower or several of them, and what you're trying to do is you are trying to get your workers into a particular tower and try to make it difficult for your opponents to do that. Has a cool memory aspect, as sometimes if your piece is on a tower and another tower lands on you, you've lost that guy until you've moved the tower on top, and you need to remember and keep a mental tabs on where all your workers are at all times. At number 20, I have Torres, more of an abstract style game. I mean, actually a former Spiel des Jahres winner, if I remember correctly, back in 2000, I believe. This one, you are building these towers or these buildings based on the footprint and the height, and if you control them, then you're going to score points based on that. Definitely a game where you have to be careful to pace yourself. Again, not leave easy opportunities for your opponent, because you can kind of block people off jumping up on these buildings and things. Again, very abstract in its nature, but definitely clean, and it has aged well, I think. That is Torres. At number 19, I have Pueblo. a unique game to say the least, as you are placing these kind of L-shaped blocks on this grid, trying to keep your colour covered up by the other ones, because each turn there's going to be this piece that circles the map, and depending on where it sees is going to give points to how many blocks it can see, and also the level on where those blocks are. And you don't want to be scoring points in this game, so you definitely want to be kind of shafting your opponents and moving that piece to see as many of your opponent's blocks as possible. At number 18, I have Maharaja. This one is a game that's, I think, has faded into obscurity. It definitely hasn't taken off or kind of kept in the limelight like some of these other ones have. But this is an area control style game. As you are moving your piece around this map, visiting these different locations, kind of building up influence there based on a predetermined order on where these Maharaja is going to visit and score these locations. I did like this idea of investing in these shrines on these pathways, so when your opponent moves past your shrines, you get some income from them. Some cool special abilities as well, and the action system is actually very cool as you're using this disc basically, and using these little pointers to predetermine or program the actions that you're taking. At number 17, I have Colosseum, along with the Princes of Florence, because these games kind of go hand in hand. This is, these are an auction style games where you are collecting different goods in order to put on these big displays, especially in Colosseum. And you are trying to improve on your previous score, and this game actually has one of the coolest scoring systems, where you're playing like, I don't know, 5 or 6 rounds, whatever, but only your best score will count. So you could score 30 points in the first round, 20 points in the second round, but they don't add together. Only your best round will be your final score. So, and you're always trying to put on these bigger and bigger displays, trying to manipulate this board state so these important people are visiting your arena. It's cool. I've played it to death already, so it's fallen a bit because of that, but I can certainly see why fans of Gateway Plus level games would like this one. And at number 16, I have Heaven and Ale, a game I've not played in some time, but I recall this one being a great use of the kind of one-way street mechanism, as you can go as far as you want to collect a resource, but you cannot go back on yourself. And you're populating your player board in quite an interesting way, as one half of your board is in shadow, one is in the light, one is going to correspond to money you're getting, and one is going to correspond to points. And if I remember correctly, money in this game is very, very tight, and the scoring's a little bit weird as well, as you want to keep all of these resources topped up as much as possible, because at the end of the game, your best markers are going to kind of depreciate to boost up your lowest ones. So it's definitely quite mathy in the way that it works, but I would love to revisit this one. That is Heaven and Ale. At number 15, I have Adventureland, another very family-friendly style game, as you have this big grid with this kind of fantasy land. You're moving your pieces in a kind of downwards and right direction, picking up goods as you go, trying to fight these monsters and collecting points, as well as trying to control these castles. And the twist in this game is that if you go down, you can never go back on yourself. So you want to be making sure you're pacing yourself quite carefully, because if you rush too far down and something appears higher on the board, you cannot go back. So you kind of want to keep some workers a bit lazy and rush some workers to get some very pivotal pieces on the board. At number 14, I have Miyabi, a tile placement game with a 3D aspect, as not only are you trying to place these tiles to create groups of certain icons, but you're getting bigger multipliers as you stack them on top of each other, with some pretty tight restrictions as well, as you cannot place the icons in the same column more than once per round. At number 13, I have El Caballero. This is an area control tile placement game, as you're building up this map, but also using your influence markers to control these different islands, as well as doing lots of different things like trying to control the seas or looking in these places to touch several islands. I like the resource or the kind of influence management system, as you need to be making sure that you're keeping your workers topped up so that you can keep on boosting your influence on the board. At number 12, I have Expeditions. I've only just got this one recently into my collection. It's a reprint of a game all the way back from the 90s, where you are trying to move these kind of routes around this big map of the world, trying to visit all of your locations as well as these communal locations. But the twist on this one is that these routes are not assigned to each player. So each player actually has control over the route, so they are communally moved around the map. It can be frustrating at times, but I actually do like the way that sometimes you can piggyback off your player's efforts, the other player's efforts, and even achieve goals when your opponents have taken their turns. At number 11, I have Renature. This is another area control game, but with a domino style mechanism, as you are placing these very nice chunky animal domino tiles on the map, trying to touch them together, spawning influence onto the adjacent fields. It has this cool mechanism where if you and an opponent have the exact same influence, then you cancel each other out and it will fall down to the next player. So it can be quite cutthroat, despite being so lovely to look at. At number 10, I have Sealand. This one is quite a purist game, as you're moving around this rondel, trying to place these kind of windmills and these tulip fields on the board, trying to score influence based on completing or surrounding your windmills. I do like the way that this has a kind of a tide line scoring system as well, a bit like Colosseum, although it's not a pivotal part of the game. And also has a great money management system, as depending on the amount of money you spent, could limit the options that your opponent can take. At number 9, I have Linko, so the first card game, I believe, or small box card game on the list. This is a shedding style game, as you're trying to get rid of your cards, but sometimes you can pick up cards in order to boost to other ones in order to do bigger turns later. If you like games like Scout, this is a great one to look at. At number 8, I have Nauticus, another game that's definitely flown under the radar. This is a game where you're trying to build these big ships and load them up with as many goods as you can. It has this kind of conflicting scoring system where obviously the bigger and more pimped up your ships are, the more points you'll get. But for each ship you complete, no matter how big it is, you get quite a healthy bonus. A great action selection system where when you take an action, it's going to be locked out for the other players, and you'll also get kind of a sub-action within that to get like more workers, etc. Very Gateway Plus level Euro-style game that I enjoy a lot. At number 7, I have The Palaces of Carrara, a resource management style game where you are collecting these bricks based on this wheel system, where every round the bricks are going to get cheaper and cheaper. So do you want to hold off but risk your opponent buying them? And you are trading these bricks in to build these buildings and investing in these different cities. And it has this kind of chicken system where if you score a city, then that city won't be scored again. So you kind of want to invest heavily and then score it and get huge multipliers, but your opponent might choose to score it and kind of stop you from really kind of building up on that particular location. Some good end game variability as well, and just a nice clean Euro. So that is Palaces of Carrara at number 7. At number 6, I have Savannah Park. Definitely a game for people who like organising things, as this one is essentially like a big sliding puzzle, as you're moving these animal tokens on a bingo style mechanism into their particular groups and scoring multipliers based on these watering holes. And you're trying to create these big networks to make sure that all the animals are placed optimally to score as big of a multiplier as possible. At number 5, I have 6 Nimpt, another small box card game, a very popular one actually that's been around for a long time, as you're simultaneously choosing cards from your hand, placing them in rows based on numerical values, and if you are placing the 6th one on a particular row, then you're going to be forced to take all the other cards and take them as negative points. So it's all about trying to understand what your opponents might be going for and trap them into taking cards. At number 4, I have Mexica. This is another game of the Mask trilogy along with Tikal. I've not played the third one, Java or Cusco, unfortunately. But Mexica is another game that uses the action points allowance system, as you are building up these different regions to fight for area control. So I like the way that you're actually crafting the board as you play. Bigger the regions, the more influence they're going to be worth. And you're erecting these temples trying to have the most influence in these regions, but you can only contribute influence if you have your player piece there and you're using the board as a network to move your piece around, kind of sailing along these rivers so that you can build more temples. Again, I think the action points mechanism system gets a little bit of undue criticism because people say it's a bit dated and AP prone. I can understand the AP prone nature of it, but I actually think it's an underused mechanism. At number 3, I actually have the most recent game on this entire list. This is Terra Pyramides. So this one is brand new, hot off the press, a very clean tile placement style game with some resource management as you're placing these tiles on this big grid, essentially on the board. And depending on kind of the row or column or even diagonals where the tile you've just placed is sitting, you can take a bunch of resources or these kind of workers, and you're trying to basically build these pyramids. Each level of the pyramid costs more and more resources, but the ability to get those resources become more difficult. And you can piggyback off your opponent's efforts. You're getting points based on kind of surrounding temples and different mechanisms based on different modules in the game. The actual gameplay is so simple, just draw a tile and place a tile, but the fallout of your decisions is big, and it has a real classic feeling Euro kind of vibe to it, despite being a brand new one. So this one I could not recommend enough if you like your old school Euros. Fantastic gameplay, Terra Pyramides at number 3. At number 2, I have Vikings. Vikings, a game I do not understand why this one is out of print. I think this one should be in so many more people's collections, and it could be a colossal hit if only more people knew about it, and if only more people, well, if only if it was more available. So this one, you are placing these tiles onto your own personal player board and building these kind of little peninsulas, which are based in these rows, and then trying to populate them with particular colours of Vikings. Each Viking has a particular use. Some of them will repel off these enemy ships. Some of them will generate you more money. Some of them will feed your workers. Some of them will give you victory points. And the actual drafting system is so cool because it's based on this kind of supply and demand wheel where if you really want something, you might have to pay a lot for it. But when the cheaper options get bought, the wheel rotates around, making the more expensive options cheaper. It's a fantastic game. I could not recommend it enough. That is Vikings. And finally, at number 1 is El Grande. Of course, it was going to be El Grande. If you watch my channel, you might be aware that El Grande is my favourite game of all time. It is the original area control game, at least to my knowledge. And for me, it is still the absolute best, the cream of the crop when it comes to area control or area majority. It's a card-driven game, as you are bidding for influence. In order to claim these action cards. The action cards will let you manipulate the board state by deploying more workers, shifting meeples around, changing the value of each region. Also has some additional wrinkles to the gameplay, such as this Castillo, where you are blindly placing your workers in there, or influence markers in there. You cannot look in there again, and you can even redeploy them based on this simultaneous selection wheel. Also some restrictions in terms of where you can actually deploy troops, because you can only ever deploy troops in the regions surrounding where the king is at all times. And all these moving parts just harmonise together to make such a rich gameplay experience. And for me, it's one of the only few 10 out of 10 board games that I have played. So El Grande at number 1, of course it was going to be that way. So that's the top 25, just some other honourable mentions that just missed out. Riverboat was a good one. Paris was also decent. Big Boss, kind of Kramer's take on Acquire. Downforce, a nice racing game. El Capitan was a pretty dusty but decent old school Euro. So unfortunately I've not had a chance to play a lot of the Azul series. I've not had a chance to play Cusco, also in Java, and also Coal Baron as well. So I would have liked to have played those before making this list, but sadly that doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. But hopefully this was an enjoyable video and a useful video to you guys. If it was, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.